They called me the odd cousin from out west. At my sister's engagement party, no one even used my real name. Not until her future father-in-law heard my last name. Then the entire room changed, and suddenly, I wasn't the invisible girl in the navy blouse anymore. I was the storm they didn't see coming. In this story, I'll take you through a celebration that wasn't meant for me. A party where I was treated like a stranger, until the truth about my name rewrote the rules. You'll see how a woman they tried to dismiss became the one holding every card. This isn't a revenge tale. It's about precision, control, and the quiet power of being underestimated. But before I share how the bride's smug smile cracked, tell me this. Have you ever walked into a room where no one expected you to matter, only to prove you were the most important person there? Let's begin. They didn't say my name. Not when they handed me a glass of champagne. Not when they introduced me to the guests. Not even when they whispered behind manicured hands about Serena's side of the family. I was just the cousin from out west. The odd one. The artist. The one who, according to my mother, lives somewhere near the desert, doing something with computers. Truth is, I arrived 10 minutes early, heels clicking on marble floors that weren't made to welcome me. I wore a navy silk blouse I'd once worn to negotiate a $28 million contract. But in this house, no one asked what I did. They only asked where I came from and made sure I stayed in the corner that question implied. My sister Serena looked radiant, of course. She always did. Pastel dress, flawless makeup, diamond engagement ring that caught every drop of light. She floated through the crowd like she belonged to it. And maybe she did. We shared a mother, but not a childhood. She got ballet lessons and birthday parties with ponies. I got a bus pass and a fridge full of sticky notes reminding me to clean. It wasn't that she hated me, she just didn't see me. And maybe that was worse. Still, I showed up. To a party I was barely invited to. Because some part of me, the part that still believed families could change, wanted to be proven wrong. But standing there, listening to her fiancé call me the oddball cousin, I knew I hadn't come to celebrate her. I came to remember who I was. And as I sipped champagne no one really offered, a voice from across the room cut through the air like glass. Did you say, Whitaker? Have you ever walked into a room where they didn't expect you to matter? And still, you stayed. If you've ever been the odd one in your own story, tell me, because I know I'm not alone. Serena and I shared a hallway growing up. That's about all we shared. She was the daughter of my stepfather, born into a world where her wins were celebrated and her mistakes were quietly erased. I was the daughter of a man no one ever mentioned. My mother never said his name, not even when I asked. Serena had dance recitals, family portraits, and sleepovers with cupcakes and crafts. I had a key under the mat and a list of chores taped to the fridge. Her room was lavender, mine was the guest room. Her photos sat on the mantel. Mine never made it past the junk drawer. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no slamming doors, just silence. The kind that stretches across years and teaches a girl to shrink before anyone asks her to. I remember once, Serena got caught shoplifting at the mall. My mother called the manager, had the tape wiped clean, and told Serena she was just exploring boundaries. 2 weeks later, I missed curfew by 15 minutes. My phone was taken for a month, and I was grounded from a party I wasn't even invited to. I learned the rules early. Serena made mistakes. I made problems. So I left. Went to college on scholarships, built my life city by city, client by client, never once being asked to come home. But I never really forgot. Not the way my mother smiled wider when Serena walked in. Not the way she flinched when someone asked what I did for a living. I stopped trying to earn her approval years ago. But I still wondered, what would happen if they ever had to see me clearly? And that night, in that estate nestled in Connecticut hills, as Harold Ashcroft turned from the fireplace with my last name in his mouth, I got my answer. The funny thing about families like mine is that they teach you early to smile, but not too brightly, to speak, but only when it's convenient, to succeed, but never so loudly that it makes anyone uncomfortable. Serena once told me, when I landed my first six-figure client, "That's great, Noel, just don't let it go to your head." As if ambition were something shameful, as if confidence was a crime. I remember standing at that party, holding a glass no one filled for me, and watching her glide from guest to guest like a perfect hostess, a pastel blur of charm and calculation. And when she finally approached me, it wasn't warmth in her voice. It was damage control. "We told everyone you were my cousin," she said, eyes fixed somewhere past my shoulder. "It's just easier that way." Easier for whom? I didn't ask. I already knew. The message was the same as always. Be present, but not prominent. Be visible, but not vivid. Don't take up too much space in a room you weren't invited to own. And Troy, her polished fiancé, was no different. He smiled that careful, tight-lipped smile men wear when they're trying to manage a situation, not respect it. "You're the artist cousin, right?" he asked, his tone dipped in condescension. "Oddball creative type?" Serena mentioned. I nodded, sipped my champagne, let the silence do the heavy lifting, because I'd learned long ago, some insults are best answered by what comes next. And what came next was a voice from across the room, firm, curious, unmistakably authoritative. "Did you say Whitaker?" And just like that, the rules of the room began to shift. Whitaker. That one word sliced through the party chatter like a cold wind through glass. I turned toward the voice, older, deeper, precise. Harold Ashcroft. Troy's father, and the man behind one of the most formidable capital firms on the East Coast. He stood near the fireplace, untouched drink in hand, his gaze fixed on me with the kind of attention I'd never received in this family, not once. "As in, Whitaker Holdings?" he asked, each syllable deliberate. I didn't blink. "I'm the founder and managing partner," I said. It was the first time all night I spoke plainly, and it was the first time all night someone actually listened. A ripple moved through the room. Not a dramatic gasp, no dropped glasses, just a shift, the kind you feel before a storm hits. A cousin stopped mid-sentence. A waiter paused his tray. Serena's laugh grew louder, too loud. Troy tightened his grip on her waist. I watched Harold's expression adjust. Surprise flickered, then calculation, then something that looked a lot like respect. "I've seen your name on the merger proposal," he murmured. "We've been in talks. Your firm kept it anonymous." "That was intentional," I said. He nodded once, slow and sharp, and in that moment I knew he understood exactly who I was, what I'd built, what I now had the power to change. I didn't need to make an announcement, didn't need to raise my voice. Because in rooms like these, power doesn't walk in shouting. It walks in already knowing the outcome. And for the first time in my life, I did. But what Harold didn't yet know was that his son had just humiliated the woman who held the pen over his company's future. And that realization was coming faster than any of them were ready for. I didn't explain myself. Didn't list my degrees, my clients, or the deals I'd closed while they were planning floral centerpieces. because that was the point. Silence was never weakness. It was my strategy. For months, my firm had been negotiating a merger. Whitaker Holdings, my company, was positioned as an anonymous party, deliberate, calculated, because I didn't need credit to gain control. I just needed the signature. When Harold recognized my name, he wasn't just putting a face to a deal. He was realizing he'd invited the majority stakeholder of his future into his living room and let his son publicly belittle her. But I didn't flinch, didn't react, because power doesn't need to perform. It waits. It listens. It moves only when necessary. I let the rest of the night unfold like theater. Let Serena cling to her curated perfection. Let Troy smirk and shrink into his ignorance. Let my mother flutter from guest to guest, air kissing and pretending not to see what was shifting right under her nose. I didn't interrupt it. I didn't correct it. Because every assumption they made about me, every dismissal, every awkward smile, was another inch they handed me without knowing. And by morning, I would hold the whole blueprint. That night, as Harold pulled his assistant aside, as phones lit up with urgency behind closed doors, I stepped onto the back patio, heels clicking against stone. The November air bit at my skin, but it was honest, clear, unlike the warmth inside. And just when I thought the curtain was falling on the night, I heard Stiletto's approach. Serena's voice, tight, almost breathless. "Noel, I didn't think you'd actually come." I turned, not to explain, just to let her know. The game had already started. The voicemail came 3 days after the party. Her voice, soft, rehearsed, almost gentle. "Noel, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For the party, for the things Troy said, for not introducing you properly. I didn't think you'd want the attention." That last line stung more than the rest, not because it was cruel, but because it proved she still didn't see me. I let the message play twice, then once more, and then I deleted it, not out of spite, but because I no longer needed an apology that came only after the world had started paying attention. You see, when someone apologizes only after you're powerful, it's not healing. It's strategy, and I already had mine. The truth was, Serena hadn't changed. Neither had my mother. Their tone shifted the moment my name left Harold's lips. But not because they finally saw me, because now the room did. Days later, a cream-colored envelope arrived. Her handwriting hadn't changed since high school. Looped letters, hearts over every I. Inside, a note. "Troy says he didn't mean to be cruel. He was nervous. Mom regrets how things came across. I hope you'll come to the bridal shower. Maybe we can start fresh." I read it once, folded it back, didn't reply, because I'd already chosen peace. Not the kind they offered in delayed invitations and curated remorse, but the kind I built for myself when I stopped performing for people who only looked my way when it served them. And while they scrambled to salvage optics, I was already moving. By the end of that week, my legal team had finalized the merger, and I made a quiet decision. One that would shift more than just the boardroom. I could have kept it. The 3 subsidiaries we'd acquired during the merger, each one a lifeline Harold's firm depended on. Assets I now owned outright. But power, real power, isn't about holding something over people. It's about choosing what you build with what you hold. So, I made the call. Harold's assistant answered on the first ring. "Transfer the properties," I said. "Not to Ashcroft Capital, to a nonprofit trust, under my name." She hesitated. "That's extremely generous, Miss Whitaker." "No," I replied. "It's strategic. I'd rather build something that outlives me than keep feeding men who still mistake silence for insignificance. The trust would fund a vocational training center for young women like the girl I used to be, smart, invisible, underestimated. It wouldn't be just scholarships. It would be real tools, financial literacy, digital skills, career mentorship, a launch pad for the ones no one saved a seat for. And I gave it a name, one they'd never forget: the Odd Cousin Foundation. The next week, the press release hit the wires. Whitaker Holdings CEO launches Foundation for Women's Advancement. It spread fast, faster than Serena's wedding invites. Her friends shared it on social media. "Isn't this your cousin's company? Wow, your cousin is incredible. You must be so proud." She blocked most of them, because no matter how carefully she tried to reshape the story, it was already out there, and this time I was the one writing it. But I didn't do it for headlines or applause. I did it because I finally could. And just before the weekend, as I walked through Central Park with a coffee in hand and no phone calls waiting, I realized something simple, something quiet. For the first time in years, I had nothing left to prove. It started as a joke, an easy label passed around like an hors d'oeuvre. "She's kind of the oddball artist from out west." They said it with a chuckle, like I was a funny anecdote in a family that preferred symmetry and silence. But here's the thing about labels: they only stick if you don't do anything with them. So I wore it, not with shame, but with precision, and I built a foundation under its name, because sometimes the insult they hand you becomes the stone you build a kingdom with. The Odd Cousin Foundation launched quietly, no gala, no red carpet, just a press release, a mission, and 3 buildings converted into training centers across 3 cities. By the end of the month, applications poured in. Women of all ages, some in their 20s, some in their 50s, shared the same story. I was always told I didn't belong. My ideas were too much. I was too different. And now, being different meant a seat at a table they'd never been invited to before. Meanwhile, Serena's wedding photos went up on social media: perfect angles, forced smiles, captions with too many emojis. But the comment section? That was harder to control, because people weren't talking about the dress. They were tagging me. "Your cousin's incredible. She built something real." She deleted some, ignored others, but the truth was already in circulation, and this time it wasn't whispered behind my back. It was printed, shared, signed in ink and legacy. I didn't respond, not to the comments, not to Serena's second message, because by then I understood something I'd spent years chasing. I was never the punchline. I was the rewrite. And just when I thought the story had closed, a young intern approached me after a panel talk, clutching her notebook, eyes wide. "Are you Noel Whitaker?" She couldn't have been more than 24. Hair pulled back in a nervous ponytail, hands clutching a notebook like it held her courage. "Are you Noel Whitaker?" I nodded. She smiled, wide and almost relieved. "I just wanted to say, what you did with the foundation changed how I see everything. I used to think being overlooked meant I wasn't enough. Now I think it just means they didn't know where to look." Her voice cracked a little at the end, not from weakness, but from recognition. She didn't see a CEO. She saw someone who had once been where she stood. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for Serena to call. I wasn't checking for my mother's approval. I wasn't standing on the outside of someone else's table hoping for a seat. Because I had my own, I built it, board by board, brick by brick. Not out of resentment, but out of refusal. Refusal to stay small, to be named only in whispers, to be remembered only when convenient. I built a table where women like me could show up uninvited and still belong, where odd meant original, where silence was strategy, not punishment. And the truth? It's quieter than I thought it would be. No applause, no final speech, just peace, and a view of the city I once thought I had to fight for. Later that week, as I sat at my apartment window, jazz humming low in the background, a new message arrived. Not from Serena, not from Harold, but from someone entirely unexpected. A voice I hadn't heard in years. My mother. The email was short. Subject: hope you're well. Body: the wedding was lovely. We missed you. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a signature that once carried weight in my world, and now meant nothing more than an automated send-off. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I was finally done performing for people who only reached for me when the room started noticing I wasn't in it. Instead, I forwarded the email to my attorney, asked him to finalize the clause for the trust. One of the transferred buildings would become a vocational center, but not just any center. It would serve young women like the girl I once was, invisible in her own home, labeled too much in all the wrong rooms, and told she had to shrink to survive. We'd offer skill training, career prep, financial literacy, but more than that, we'd offer space. Space to take up space. I named it simply the Whitaker Center. No hearts, no lowercase, just presence. And I didn't tell my mother, didn't send her a ribbon-cutting invite, didn't ask for a blessing I never needed, because peace, real peace, doesn't ask permission. It doesn't come wrapped in apologies or tied in ceremony. It comes when you stop chasing recognition and start recognizing yourself. That night, I sat barefoot on the couch, glass of dark rum in hand, city lights blinking steady in the distance, and I played my sister's last voicemail, just once. Then I deleted it, not out of defiance, but out of softness. Some stories don't need a second act. They just need a clean ending. And mine had finally arrived. Not loud, not messy, just honest. And mine. If this story reminded you of your own silence, the kind you held for years just to keep the peace, subscribe. I share stories for women who were once overlooked and chose to build anyway.